Voilà, mesdames et messieurs, chères étudiantes et étudiants, j'ai le plaisir en 3 minutes de dire quelques mots d'accueil pour cette conférence que je permets d'adresser en français en tant que représentant de l'université, et puisque cette conférence s'inscrit aussi dans le cadre d'un cours dit transversal sur le numérique qui a lieu en français avec des étudiants d'ailleurs du cours qui sont ici présents. Étant précisé que les experts interviendront principalement en anglais et que les interprètes permettront à chacun et chacune de choisir la langue entre l'anglais et le français. D'abord, quelques mots sur le contexte de la conférence. Il s'agit de la 2e conférence d'un cycle de 4 grandes conférences débats qui ont lieu de septembre à décembre, avec pour but de renforcer le dialogue entre l'université et la cité, la société civile, et de sensibiliser sur des enjeux du numérique que je qualifierais d'urgents. Ce qui explique pourquoi chacune d'entre vous peut poser des questions, que vous soyez chez vous à la maison ou avec nous aujourd'hui dans la salle. La première conférence qui a eu lieu en septembre, et que vous pouvez d'ailleurs revisionner sur la page web des conférences, concernait le lien social à l'ère numérique, sujet qui nous semblait évident et urgent en temps de pandémie, où le numérique apparaît comme la solution pour garder le contact avec l'autre. Et aujourd'hui, cette 2e conférence sur environnement et numérique est un sujet tout aussi évident et urgent, mais peut-être moins visible pour certains. Évident et urgent, car le numérique a une double nature. D'une part, il a un formidable potentiel pour l'environnement en permettant de guider les politiques quant à la gestion de la crise climatique ou encore en permettant de réduire la consommation énergétique dans de nombreux secteurs. On mentionne souvent les voitures autonomes permettant une meilleure fluidité du trafic. Mais d'autre part, il représente aussi une menace pour l'environnement avec une évolution exponentielle des technologies, dont l'explosion des vidéos en streaming, avec un coût énergétique important, au point qu'on entend dire qu'en 2020, la part d'émissions du CO2 due au stockage de données aurait dépassé celui de l'aviation civile planétaire. En 2025, elle dépasserait celle des voitures. Et en 2245, la moitié de la masse de la Terre serait dédiée au stockage, au point que certains parlent de catastrophe dans l'information. Le sujet est aussi moins visible, même pour les usagers les plus diligents quant à leur empreinte environnementale. Il suffit de songer à nos smartphones. Nous les utilisons quotidiennement et recevons chaque mois une facture d'électricité qui représente la partie visible de notre consommation. Or, cette facture d'électricité ne tient pas forcément compte de toute la consommation. Je pense en particulier aux nombreuses fermes de serveurs qui tournent à plein régime pour faire marcher nos vidéos et nos téléphones portables. Alors l'idée aujourd'hui est de nous sensibiliser sur ces questions, ainsi que d'évaluer l'équilibre entre ce que je disais potentiel et menaces évoquées pour l'environnement, et vérifier si ce ratio est compatible avec les enjeux climatiques et, cas échéant, quelles mesures adopter. Parmi les mesures, on peut penser réguler pour une consommation numérique mieux ciblée, voire une sobriété numérique avec des produits durables, dits conception par défaut ou sustainable by design. Pour cela, nous avons le plaisir d'accueillir des expertes et représentants des organisations internationales à Genève qui jouent un rôle prédominant, un rôle clé pour ce sujet. Avant de céder la parole, impossible pour ma part de terminer ces mots sans remercier les personnes qui ont permis une telle conférence. Bien entendu, d'abord le rectorat, l'équipe du Bureau de la transformation numérique, les interprètes, l'équipe de technique et de communication, en particulier M. Seth Touizabé et Mme Muriel Zolimando et Mme Mélina Tiftikoglu. Sans plus attendre, je laisse la parole à la modératrice, Mme Julie Cumer, pour présenter le déroulé et les intervenants. Et je nous souhaite une excellente conférence.
On va passer à l'anglais. Du coup, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to this Digital and Sustainability Conference. I'd like to thank Dr. Benhamou for the invitation to moderate this event. In my daily job as a journalist for RTS, I mostly create digital content, and in the radio TV show I work for, Forum, sustainability is a topic that we discuss a lot. Long story short, if Dr. Benhamou would have had a part about Japanese cuisine, this would have been my dream conference. Tonight, the conference is going to be held in 2 parts. First, our three speakers are going to give their speeches for about 10 minutes each. And then your online and in-flesh audience will be more active, as we are going to discuss the topics all together, and you'll be able to ask questions here with a microphone and online. You have Slido app. You can find it on the website of the conference. If you need the code to enter the app, it's 25869. Now, I'm honored to introduce our first speaker, Mrs. Doreen Bogdan-Martin. Since almost 2 years, Mrs. Bogdan-Martin is the Director of Telecommunication Development Bureau at the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, which is the United Nations specialized agency for information and communication technologies. She's been working there for actually 26 years. If you check her LinkedIn profile, you'll find 3 hashtags that will tell you a lot about what she's actually doing for a living. First one, and she says she's passionate about it, it's hashtag ICT for SDGs, which I had to check just to be sure means information and communication technologies for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Second, obviously, hashtag Agenda 2030, and last but not least, hashtag Leave No One Offline. Reading her profile, you'll also learn that she works to drive international cooperation, promote enabling environments, enhance confidence and security in the use of ICTs, build human and institutional capacity, promote digital inclusion, and much more. Mrs. Bogdan-Martin also serves currently and since 2010 as Executive Secretary for the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development. If you scroll all this LinkedIn page down, you'll discover that she joined 2 groups named Girls in Tech and Gender Studies Network. No surprise, as Mrs. Bogdan-Martin co-created Equals, the Global Partnership for Gender Equality in the Digital Age in 2014. Welcome, Mrs. Doreen Bogdan-Martin. You're going to join us today through video conference.
Thank you so much, Julie, for that very kind introduction. Bonsoir. It's really a great pleasure to be here this evening, and I want to thank Dr. Benhamou for inviting me to this important discussion on digital and sustainability. I am the director, as Julie mentioned, of the development arm of the International Telecommunications Union. We're based in Geneva. We are also the oldest agency in the UN system, and our mission is all about connectivity. We started back in 1865 with the telegraph, and today, of course, it's all about the internet and our mission to bring the 3.6 billion that don't have access to the internet online. But tonight I was asked to speak about how digital technologies can help respond to the global climate emergency. I also want to consider whether information and communication technologies, or ICTs, might actually be part of the problem too, and if so, what can we do about it? I think it's fair to say that we are living at a time of profound disruption. The COVID pandemic continues to rage worldwide. Our economies have never looked more fragile, and the rise of new technologies like AI are actually challenging old business models and threatening many traditional employment sectors. It can seem a bit like the perfect storm with so many crises besetting us simultaneously. But of all the many problems we face, the global climate emergency is there, front and center. Man-made climate change is transforming our landscapes. It's changing our weather patterns. So what role can technology play? Well, technology alone cannot solve the climate crisis. To do that, we would need a major reset on the way we live and the way we consume. But given the will to change things, digital technologies can do much to help us protect and preserve our environment. to use our natural resources more wisely, and to tread more softly on this precious planet that we call home. One very obvious example is by helping us cut back on our need to travel, particularly on business travel. ITU has been championing for many years remote participation in meetings for over 10 years now. And we've done this through many of our technical study group sessions. These groups comprise engineers and experts from the private and public sectors who work collaboratively under the auspices of the ITU to develop technical standards and to ensure that digital equipment can seamlessly interconnect. This way of working serves us well, but until now, it was really hard to convince others to follow. It took the COVID pandemic to open the eyes of many to the power of video conferencing and online collaboration. Suddenly, almost overnight, we seem to have entered a sort of post-Zoom age where digital is now the new normal. Using ICTs to replace travel is just one simple example, and of course, there are many, many more. ITU's research on frontier technologies to protect the environment and to tackle climate change looks at how digital technology can dramatically improve energy efficiency and manufacturing processes, help recycling, improve land and water use, create more efficient smart cities, and accelerate the much needed transition to a circular economy. In line with our mandate, we're also trying to understand how we can turn digital technology innovation into climate action. We increasingly understand the important role of digital in environmental monitoring, presenting evidence on a wider range of measures that are now being deployed to cut emissions and build resilience, from space sensing observation to smart grids. And complementing this, our work on radio communications and climate change demonstrates how the use of satellite and land-based radio technologies can gather vital data such as sea level measurements. And this modeling, this of course provides the essential inputs that go into this climate modeling. Another area, environmental monitoring, is where ICTs are starting to really have a major impact. And everything from IoTs to satellite mapping tools, to GIS systems, to big data, drones. If we look at low-cost sensors, such as Internet of Things technologies, we now have the power to cost-effectively measure a huge range of environmental variables, from air and soil quality to water consumption. Conserving our natural resources is an important part of the fight against climate change. For example, better water management helps protect against chronic environmental degradation through soil loss and erosion that will help combat predicted water shortages in some parts of the world. Also allowing farmers to conserve water by choosing optimum times to irrigate, as well as helping to detect and repair aging and even leaky water networks, which can of course waste a huge amount of water en route to users. At the same time, increasingly sophisticated satellite mapping applications are improving our view of the physical environment, particularly in remote and poorly documented regions, while digital GIS platforms are using big data methods to interpret and to model environmental data in new ways. And in the future, AI may also have an important role to play in helping environmentalists and geographers to quickly spot patterns that enable us to react and respond to environmental threats before they actually become major problems. And some of you may have joined the AI for Good series that the ITU hosts, and linked to that, we have, of course, our focus group that is looking at environmental efficiency for artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. I also want to mention drones. Low-cost drones are also helping us mitigate climate change, not just in the area of agricultural management, but in the increasingly important field of emergency response. And let me focus for a moment on emergency preparedness and the response part. Natural disasters now kill at least 1 million people each decade, and they leave many, many millions more homeless and cause an estimated $1.8 trillion in damage. Unfortunately, the human impact on the global climate means extreme weather events are becoming increasingly common. Digital technologies can't avert a natural disaster, but they can help nations prepare for and also limit the damage that's caused by extreme weather. Drones, GPS systems, wireless platforms are invaluable in post-disaster cleanup operations, really helping humanitarian teams quickly locate survivors, track and share real-time maps of post-disaster conditions and priority areas, and also coordinate and mobilize rapid healthcare response and even deliver vital medicines. Online platforms also provide powerful and accessible ways for disaster victims to rapidly locate missing loved ones. And our work in the field of emergency response includes not just the supply of vital emergency equipment like satellite phones and laptops for disaster hit areas, but it also includes assisting countries in setting up multi-hazard early warning systems, incorporating protocols like CAP, which is the Common Alerting Protocol, which is confirmed as an ITU global standard. And CAP allows warning messages to be disseminated simultaneously across many different systems, dramatically increasing the speed and effectiveness of disaster communications. Our work in emergency telecommunications also includes helping our members to develop national emergency telecommunications plans. And that can help to ensure availability of reliable and resilient networks, services, and platforms when disasters actually strike. And since 2018, we've supported a number of our member states in vulnerable zones, including in the Pacific Islands, from Vanuatu, Samoa, the Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, Guatemala, Bolivia, the Dominican Republic, and most recently, Afghanistan and St. Lucia. Ladies and gentlemen, digital technologies have immense potential to protect our planet. But this does not negate the fact that ICTs are also a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And rapid technological evolution has meant that there's millions of tons of e-waste piling up in landfills around the world. Last week, as some of you may have noticed, the world celebrated World Standards Day, and on the same day also celebrated International E-Waste Day. And this dovetailing of days could not have been timelier as e-waste surges globally to the tune of 21% in 5 years. Today, we have over half the world connected to the internet, and as more and more people come online, and as data-heavy applications like streaming and photo sharing platforms grow in popularity, so does demand for energy-intensive ICT equipment. And while the idea of cyber cloud may be ethereal, the impact of data centers on the physical world is all too tangible. ICTs consume somewhere between 5 and 9% of the world's electricity, and the ICT ecosystem accounts for more than 2% of global carbon emissions, emanating not just from server farms, but from ICT manufacturing and energy consumption linked to use and disposal. And the disposal itself has become problematic. Globally, the world now produces over 50 million tons of electronic waste every year. Our global e-waste monitor reports that e-waste is now the fastest growing element of the world's domestic waste stream, with about 7 kilograms of e-waste produced every year for every single person on the planet, which is incredible. Yet right now, less than 20% of that waste is being collected and recycled. These challenges are complex, but they're not insurmountable. The use of green energy to power data centers and ICT equipment itself will cut the sector's carbon footprint. And so will a focus on giving ICT equipment a second life through reuse, repair, and recycling. And we're beginning to see positive trends in this direction with new recycling techniques being pioneered to extract those valuable metals like lithium, mercury, etc. We're also seeing community-led recycling initiatives like the Repair Cafe International Foundation, which is now represented in more than 35 countries. Certainly, there's a long way to go, and the ITU is striving to play its part in developing technical standards to help reduce waste, to increase the global e-waste recycling rate, and to increase the number of countries that are implementing specific e-waste legislation. We're also working closely with our membership to develop green technical standards that promote sustainable deployment of digital technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is probably a lot to digest, so let me just leave you with a simple message. Digital technologies offer huge potential to minimize our carbon footprint. And better ways of managing our use of technology will help reduce our own industry's footprint too. Alone, technology will not solve our climate problem, but in the hands of committed policymakers, it can be a very powerful tool for change. And it will be essential. It will be essential in our work in this final vital decade of action towards the Agenda 2030 and as we work to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. With that, I hand the floor back to you, and I thank you so much for your attention and this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Doreen Bogdan-Martin, for this very interesting first part about our challenges, which are, as you said, not unsolvables. Now it's a pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Professor Lorenz Hilty. For the last 10 years, Professor Hilty has been working as the Department of Informatics at the University of Zurich. He also serves as the Sustainability Delegate of the same university and heads the Cross-Institutional Informatics and Sustainability Research Group, shared by the University of Zurich and EMPA, which is the Swiss Federal Laboratories for Material Science and Technology. When Professor Hilty first began to work for EMPA in July 2000, his research and teaching were already guided by this question: how can we use the transformational power of digital technologies to create more sustainable patterns of consumption and production? Ethics is a topic that seems also to guide Professor Lorenz's project, as he teaches a class of informatics, ethics, and society, and is also expert in ethics for the Swiss Academy of Engineering Science. Member of the advisory board of the Swiss Green Economy Symposium, of the expert committee on environmental informatics, and I could go on for quite a long time with all the Professor Hilty's memberships that are proof of his involvement for the environment. To find more of them, I had to dig this time in the website of the Department of Informatics to find out Lorenz Hilty's personal contribution to climate protection. No air travel since March 2017. He's a member of No Fly Clemency, which is a group of scientists, academics, or members of the public who are flying less. He has no car, and is a flexitarian who usually eats no meat or fish. I'm pretty sure you came, just like me, by train to join us this evening, and we are very pleased to welcome you, Professor Lorenz Hilty.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, really. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak a few minutes about the opportunities and risks of the digital transition for the environment. I can't see my presentation yet. but I can already start. I would like to share these 4 theses with you. Okay. Yes, 4 theses. Just to be brief, first thesis, the digital transition provides a great opportunity to reduce the damage we do to the environment every day. Yes, and in this word opportunity, you can now imagine almost everything what has been said by Doreen Bogdan before in her wonderful speech. So there is a great opportunity to stop our environmental damage in the digital transition. And this opportunity, and this is my second thesis, this comes mainly from the fact that the digital technology has been extremely successful in bringing down the energy and materials demand that we need to produce something useful closer to zero. And it goes closer and closer to zero. I will substantiate this thesis in a minute. But third thesis, we are systematically missing this opportunity. So we always find a way to somehow do the opposite, to somehow extend or expand whatever can be expanded. And this is the basic problem. So we seem to be locked into a game that forces us to expand whatever we can expand. I'm intentionally not using the word growth here because I think growth is maybe too good a word for just exponential expansion of something. And there are 4 mechanisms behind. No, only 3 on this slide, only 3, sorry. Mechanisms that explain how we are doing this. We create ever more energy-intensive applications we wouldn't really need for solving the problems of this world. We manage to devaluate and dissipate the materials we build into the digital technology faster and faster. And we also have the problem that this technology, via network effects, is now used to lock in users, to survey users, and in the end to create something like nudged consumption or even forced consumption. So just the basic idea of this, actually, of this success story in the digital technology. When it began in the year 1946, where the first digital programmable electronic computer was operating, the ENIAC, we got, for 1 kilowatt hour, we got 1,000 calculations, 1,000 operations. And then today it's a quadrillion, so 10 to the power of 15 computations for just 1 kilowatt hour. But on the other side of the coin, we really expanded our demand faster than this efficiency was growing. We are doing things like Bitcoin, like training deep learning models. And you may also have heard that YouTube streaming creates a lot of energy demand and CO2 emissions in the internet. By the way, this is not because streaming would be so energy efficient. It's something around 50 watts per video stream. It's because so many hours are streamed. Yes, only YouTube streaming is something like 1 billion hours per day. Yes, so 10 to the power of 9 hours per day. So it's the sheer amount of what we are doing that is creating the problems. On the other hand, there are big promises from the Silicon Valley companies, the big ones, who they all claim to become carbon neutral. And if we would really manage this, to have carbon neutral electricity to power all of this, then the world would already look quite better. Second point is materials efficiency. So when the first one-chip processor was built in 1971, we had something like thousands of transistors on one chip. 40 years later, we had billions of transistors on one chip. So this is a factor of 1 million. And if we look at the computing performance increase, this was per kilogram of hardware. The computing performance increased by a factor of 2 billion in 40 years. Yes, this is because it is not only becoming smaller, but also becoming faster. So we have we started with megabytes of clock speed, and we now have megahertz of clock speed, and we now have gigahertz of clock. So that this multiplies. And so if you imagine that we had 40 years ago a computer of 2 tons, to do the same today, we only would need 1 milligram of material, to do the same computation at the same speed. But again, our demand expanded faster than this incredible efficiency increase. And this has many reasons. One point is important to see that the materials also get more complex. So today, digital electronics is the only technology that needs more than half of the whole periodic table. So more than 50 metals are in every electronic device. But fortunately not much. But some of them are conflict minerals, they power conflicts. So by buying them, we feed conflicts and violence in many parts of the world. I have to speed up a little bit. You heard about the e-waste piling up even faster than this reduction is possible by increasing materials efficiency. And as mentioned before, even per capita, e-waste is increasing in the world. Although we have this reduction from 2 tons to 1 milligram, we even faster increased our demand for computation so that we produce more hardware waste than ever. And it is not a surprise that this is just the pattern we have everywhere. It's exponential growth of materials extraction. This is now all sectors together, and what we need for the IT sector is only a very small part of it. So it's food, it's textiles, it's construction, it's all the fossil energy, the orange part of it. So if we look at this, we see that we must change something fundamentally. And this fundamental change could possibly be helped by digital transition. If we rethink the digital age from the perspective of sustainability, and this is the main message of this report, which I want to recommend for reading. I was not involved. It's a report with the title Towards Our Common Digital Future. It reminds of our Common Future report, the Brundtland report from the 80s, but now our common digital future. And I would like to add to this important sentence here that we also should overcome some stereotypes to have a good discourse about a bright, digital, sustainable future. Thank you very much.
I really like this last slide. Thank you very much for this most exciting speech. We really understand that we need to change something. Already our last speaker. It is my great pleasure to introduce Bruno Pozzi, Director of the Europe Office of the United Nations Environment Programme, also called UNEP. Prior to joining UNEP, Mr. Pozzi was appointed in 2015 as the deputy head of the delegation of the European Union to Kenya. Coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Belgium, he joined the newly created European External Action Service in 2011 and served as the head of the political section of the European Union delegation to Ivory Coast until 2015. Bruno Pozzi started his career at the Institute for International and Strategic Relations of the Free University of Brussels before joining the Belgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in October 1999. He has served in Belgian embassies in China, South Africa, and Japan. Mr. Pozzi will talk Japanese gastronomy later. Bruno Pozzi has no LinkedIn profile, and the website of the University of Zurich had no information about him. I would normally have gone to the archives of the Free University of Brussels, where Mr. Pozzi got his master's degrees in European politics, but coronavirus wouldn't let me. So I asked Google, where I learned that he's an officier de l'ordre de la couronne, I don't know how to say that in English, in Belgium, and an officier de l'ordre du mérite in the Ivory Coast, but also that once in an interview, Bruno Pozzi said, "Education is as fundamental as communication, and it must facilitate the building of environmental awareness and encourage behavioral changes." And I'm 100% sure that the talk you're going to give today is going to be as inspiring as this quote. Welcome, Mr. Bruno Pozzi.
That works, OK. Bonsoir et merci beaucoup pour l'introduction. Il va falloir que je parle à Google pour qu'il change toutes les choses. Mais merci beaucoup et je vais attendre. Normalement, ma présentation va venir dans une seconde, je pense, ou je dois peut-être. Ah, voilà. Donc, très bien. Donc, then I'll switch to English if you don't mind. So, good evening. My name is Bruno Pozzi, as been said, and I'm the Regional Director for Europe of the UN Environment Programme based here in Geneva. And let me start the presentation, which, as other speakers have said, is also focused on the next 10 years, because that's what we have in front of us to really make a difference. Works. Planet Earth. Okay. So we've got two core trends sweeping the planet. And from an environmental point of view, we see three crises. The climate crisis, climate change is a fact. The nature crisis, which is linked to the loss of biodiversity. We are at risk of losing 1 million species if we don't act. And the pollution crisis, the air quality that we can breathe with or without mask, is an issue and killing many human beings every year. And then we've got the Sustainable Development Goals that are pushing the UN and driving our efforts for the planet, for the people, for the prosperity, and for peace on the blue planet. But the clock is ticking indeed. As I said, every scientific assessment gives us 10 years to solve these planetary problems, while also achieving the SDGs by 2030. So we can't say we don't know, and we are really at a pivotal moment in human history, and the decisions we will take today will influence the future of human evolution and life on this planet. And you can see that the planet on the right-hand side, on my side at least, is not so nice to live in. It's really too warm. But we need to change, and we need to change fast and in an exponential way. Business as usual will not work, and you can see on this is the global fossil fuel CO2 emissions that we've got, and the gap in between the two is what we need to bridge in order to not be burnt every time we go outside. We need to reduce this gap as much as possible, and that's where we can harness the power of technology, because advancements in digital technologies are an opportunity, and we've heard from colleagues just a few minutes ago, but we can really change our food system, our transport system, our energy systems, and the way we use the scarce resources of planet Earth. Decarbonize, dematerialize, detoxify, and drive sustainable and resilient civilization. This is just to say that we need to act fast, and actually technology makes us act even faster if we really use it properly. 60% of the Sustainable Development Goals are directly influenced by digital technologies, and we can, in the SDGs, we've got a number of targets, 103 of them are directly influenced by a combination of digital technologies. So we can, by really using the technologies in the right way, have the right impact. This is an example. When we study how the Aral Sea has shrunk in the last 2-3 decades since 1985, in fact, we would, if we were using maps and normal technology, we would take about 30 years to get the same data that we've got there. But with modern processes, it just took Google Earth Engine in 45 days using 10,000 computers in parallel in the cloud. This is the power of digital transformation at play for the environment. Other examples, the drones, it has been said before, but one single drone can do the work of, it's coming, 60, it's coming soon, well, 60 environmental inspectors. So instead of deploying 60 persons on the ground to check what the environmental damage of an industry, for example, or an activity is, you use a drone and you've got the work of 60 people done in a few hours. And reforestation drones can also seed 100,000 trees a day, which is not achievable by any human being. Transformative power of digital can also influence behaviors, and we've done experiments with large companies, and in fact we've managed with one of the Chinese big players to have 500 million people joining the effort and changing their consuming behaviors, actually making environmentally conscious buys on the internet that allowed that company to plant 120 million trees and reducing carbon emissions by 6 million tons. In agriculture, it has been said as well, we can really improve efficiency with smart agriculture. Using technology, we can have 30% more resources created and avoid 20% of food waste. And vertical farming uses less water, and we can also really lower the use of herbicide, of pesticide, of chemicals that can strongly damage the environment, and this can be done 90% less chemicals if we use the power of technology in our agriculture. Also, we can predict what will happen with the environment. We can do forecasts, and there again we can save life, but we can also predict the impact of an environmental action in Zurich. What impact will it have on Geneva if we do that properly? Lastly, the power of digital is also working on the brains of many people and exposing the people to the emotional impact of virtual reality has proven to increase awareness about climate change, pollution, and the loss of biodiversity. Oops. A few more examples. This is, again, as we are going fast on time, but really using the power of the internet and buying online to change consumer patterns has been proven, and we've had a lot of experiments, and we got a lot of support from a number of companies to do that. So this is an incredible time to be alive, but also a moment of great responsibility, as has been said, because there's the positive side, but there's also a number of negative impacts. Technology has a potential to increase power in the hands of a few. It does, for some, create a loss of employment opportunities. It does increase inequality and asymmetry around the world. It decreases privacy, or potentially can. It increases misinformation, polarization, and it has been said it has a large environmental footprint on energy, on e-waste, and on raw materials that we consume to produce these things. So which side do we want to be on? A digital transformation that would lead, of course, to sustainable, resilient, equitable civilization and economy. The light fire. So what can we do to do that? We must influence the core structural pillars of the economy, and that's what we believe in UNEP. It's by using the power of digitalization and the economy and the private sector that we can have our key missions fulfilled. Bring transparency, that's the governance aspect, really, to have these global and national goals being progressive. Align capital on these goals. That's when we engage with the finance. That's when we engage with the markets. Make supply chains more sustainable. That's from the farm to fork, for example, when it comes to agriculture. And incentivize sustainable consumption. That's the choices that you and I can do on a daily basis. And for this, we can use everything that the digital world is giving us. But we have to collectively answer three key questions. A, we need to answer how we create a data ecosystem. How can we support and scale environmental change through a well-governed and inclusive digital ecosystem and a set of environmental digital goods? We must look at transformation. How can we deploy the environmental digital public goods to inform and transform markets, supply chains and consumer behaviors? It doesn't stop. And lastly, if it comes, we need to be digitally literate because the big divide has got to be bridged, and citizens all around the world need to be active stakeholders and engage on the environmental dimensions of digital transformation so that there is also an impact on the governance. I think I'll stop there because I've used my 10 minutes, but I had one more slide, but we'll go to question and answer later. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Bruno Pozzi, for this indeed inspiring speech. You can stay on the stage, actually, and Professor Hilty, you can also sit here and there. I'll please ask all the persons in the conference room to keep the mask on when asking a question on the microphone. And if you're watching this conference online, you already know that you can ask all the questions through the app Slido. I'm aware that some students have already prepared some questions, right? Do you already have a microphone? Perfect.
Good evening. Good evening, my name is Ivan. I'm studying law. I just started my master. I'm following the course of Dr. Benhamou, Understanding the Digital.
Hello, I'm Diana Boeva, and I'm studying biomedical science in the Faculty of Medicine in second year, and I'm also in the course of transversal studies of numeric.
So as said, we were tasked to represent a group of students and ask some questions to the experts, task which was made harder since you already answered some of them, but we had some reserve. So first question we have is, at the beginning of 2020, the amount of data in the digital world was estimated to be 44 zettabytes, according to the WEF, which is 40 times more than the number of stars in the observable universe, just to give a scale. Seeing how the data production is growing exponentially, and thus the energy consumption, it's about 1% of global electricity demand today. What do you think the actors in the field and the states could do to rethink the digital paradigm in a more conscious manner?
I didn't get all the question, but
what
Sorry.
could be done? What could be done to rethink the digital paradigm with such a huge amount of data that is being stored and that is using in more and more electricity? That's the idea.
Do you want to answer it?
I can try to give an answer. I think that there is a sort of a balance between the efficiency to store data and the amount of data we are producing and storing. So I don't really think that the amount of energy we need to store data is increasing dramatically. It's just such a pity that we do not use the increasing efficiency of the technology to bring down the energy consumption. But we always fill the space and we overfill it a little bit that is given to us by the technological development. And I think most of this data we are storing is not really so interesting. So the explosion of data is mainly currently due to video and due to the higher resolution, even higher resolution video. So you could with one video you could replace thousands of books, or so it doesn't say anything about the content of this data. It's just filling the space that you give to the data.
Thank you. Do you have another question, I think?
I have a question. What strategies would you use to bring the digital technologies to developing countries without aggravating climate change and also the gap between the countries?
Maybe Mrs. Bogdan-Martin wants to answer this one. She can hear us, right? No, she can't. No, she's gone. Okay. Well, maybe do you want to answer it? Pardon?
How could we bring technologies to developing countries without aggravating climate change and also the gap between the countries?
It's working. Okay. Well, that's a tough question, honestly. But I think there's a responsibility of the developed world towards the developing world as well. We need to bridge the gap and make sure that the global south, as we say, has access to the technologies, is able to use the technology for its development, but also that in the way we reuse, recycle, reduce our own technological development, that we bring the global south along with us. So it's not about only technology transfer, it's to develop technologies that will also serve the development of the global south. That would be how I see it.
Do you want to ask one more?
Last one. So far, sustainable development as a goal hasn't worked that well. So from what I understood, Professor Hilty, your suggestion is actually to go away from growth in an economy, or is it in going to in a sense of reducing the impact, but keep the growth as an economy, as a goal in the economy? I don't know if it was really clear.
Yes, I think that the main problem is that we didn't succeed in realizing the promise of dematerialization. So our economic growth is still coupled to material flows. And this is the main thing. So creating more value still means that we create more tons of exchange of materials with the environment. And I still believe that there could and must be a different way of growing something. That means that we can fulfill more needs of people with less materials, with less biomass, with less minerals, with less fossil fuels especially. We have to completely stop with fossil fuels, etc. But we are not on that path. The disappointing thing is that we would have this chance in principle, but we are still on the old path of creating more tons, more megatons of materials and waste to increase our prosperity a little bit.
You wanted to add something, Bruno?
Just to fully agree, first of all, with what you just said, and also say that not only do we have an opportunity with the digital technology and the changes that it brings to review this growth model that has been used and is still used today, but also the crisis that we have today with COVID also gives us an opportunity to review this, and in the framework of the global framework of sustainable consumption and production. If we could rethink growth with sustainability in mind and make a growth by, we'll use that word by lack of other word, but use an economic model that is enshrined in sustainability of consumption and production, then we would probably dematerialize a number of these flows, of this trade, while still maintaining a prosperity level that humanity wants to have. The social consensus of the level of prosperity that we want to have is another thing to debate. But that's indeed what the digitalization can bring. This further dematerialization of the flows.
There is a question on Slido about this topic. The contribution of digital technologies to CO2 emissions is regularly increasing. How far is a digital economy environmentally sustainable?
Well, if it's... I will answer. Stop it. Look, the digital technology is sustainable if we go away from fossil fuels. That's, I think, how I would frame it. We can't continue with CO2. This is a fact. And decarbonization must happen. And I think you've shown it, Professor. A number of companies are also answering that call that they need to decarbonize. They're offsetting their CO2 emissions by reforestation and by different plans. But we need to really get away from this gray model of industrialization. Now, it is where I'm more concerned is actually on the resources that we need for the digitalization, these raw materials that are used in the digital world and that are unlimited, have got a limited availability on planet Earth. And although we reduce, we recycle, we reuse them, and it has a huge impact. And as the growth is exponential, in the demand for technology is exponential, we tap more and more into these resources. So again, that's the sustainability of consumption and production that will put the equation in the right angle.
There are many questions about standards and regulations. Can that be maybe helpful, and how?
Open standards would be really something useful in the digital world. We see now that the big companies are trying to use network effects by being incompatible to each other. So they are creating network effects that allows them to lock in users. So if you want to migrate to a different operating system or whatsoever, it's always a nightmare. So you are somehow locked in, and this is not the principle that we have developed in computer science or so. This is all based on modularity and on openness, but it is now sort of the network effect is misused for creating monopolies, and this is market failure. This is not market economy anymore. This is actually, the digital economy is a sort of market failure, to put it a bit to the extreme. So, and that means that if we would have good open standards that allow for more modularity, that would also allow for using components with valuable materials in them, to use these components as long as they are functioning, which is not the case. Today we are devaluating materials much faster than their the functionality degrades. And this is a logic of, not of informatics, this is a logic of this type of economy we have now.
Reactions in the public. Do we have any questions here? Yes, there. Microphone is coming.
Hello. Sorry. Okay. My question is about the concept of dematerialization of material flows, because that's a term that's often brought up in these kind of talks about sustainable development, and I've never actually found an answer as to how that looks like concretely. I mean, processors, for example, we have miniaturized as much as possible, pretty much, if we're not looking at quantum computing, but how can we decouple the growth, economic growth in general, from material flows? That seemed to be a contradiction to me.
Maybe you want to answer it. Professor Hilty? They're fighting to answer it.
So, yes, of course. The fact that we dematerialized the digital hardware so much, in principle, without counting the rebound effect that comes then. But the fact that we could do this does not mean that we also could dematerialize the food chain or the textile industry or water or something like that. But nevertheless, we have maybe a chance to have better efficiency there that is created by the digital opportunities. For example, I think it was mentioned in the first talk, avoiding food waste. Maybe sounds like a crazy idea, but it is possible today to have robots in agriculture that allow for going away from the monocultures again and having mixed, Mischkultur in agriculture, which would be good for biodiversity. And this is possible by having robots who can differentiate all the plants and everything, and only apply as few as possible of pesticides and such things. So we have to think more creatively about using the positive side of the digital technology to bring down the material and energy intensity, and also the destructive nature of some practices for the environment, to bring that down. But it is not really unleashed this potential we have there.
Just to add, but it is also the power of digitalization on the supply chain, basically, and how through digitalization you can transform the supply chain so that that a spoon doesn't travel 2 times around the world before it reaches you in your shop, and this is really what digitalization can do with agriculture. Certainly, it will help to lower the level of food waste. You know, if food waste was a country, that would be the 3rd CO2 emitter of this planet. So really, with digitalization, this dematerialization of trade and linking, reviewing the supply chains and making them shorter, better organized, more directly linked to the market's need, will help to change, transform positively the economic development.
Thank you. While we're in this field, there is another question for you. What can be done to address your 3 key questions: data ecosystem, transformative application, digital literacy?
Well, we can put our brains all together, first of all. But no, I think the questions are still open, in fact. We really need to and for an organization like UNEP, it's to look through at these 3 questions through the environmental angle. How can we use these 3 questions to make sure that the environmental dimension of the digitalization is at the center of decision making? So these are open questions, in fact, that are really put forward for everyone, because the answer is not there yet. But we would like to have those who think digitalization, who act on digitalization, to use that angle of the environment in their thinking, because it has a huge impact on our planet and on our survival at the end.
Maybe someone wants to add something to this answer or to ask another question here. Yes?
Thank you very much. Do you think there is actual hope for the future, personally, with the technology, concrete hope, and shouldn't it come from other solutions such as less décroissance? I don't know really how to say it, but thank you. Decreasing.
Decreasing, yes, yeah. Yes. That was in both of your 3 presentations, right? Hope and fears.
I fully agree with the basic assumption in your question that technology alone does not solve problems. It can only be, if we find the political solutions to create a different future, then we will, I'm sure we will need this technology to implement this. So it may be a necessary part, that the digital technology may be a necessary part of a future sustainable world, but it is definitely not a sufficient part.
Do you want to add something?
I'm not sure that, I mean, there's a huge debate about growth or degrowth, or I don't know exactly the word in English either, but I think it's rethinking growth that we need to do. It's really looking at growth through that pattern of sustainable consumption and production. We have a number of citizens on planet Earth who need some growth to also have better lives, and we can't deny that from them. So it's really rethinking our growth patterns and making sure that by the economic model that we are using for the next 50 years will be sustainable enough to give something to our children and the children of our children and so on. So.
In terms of solutions, there is another question here. I will translate it. Are there any tools or patterns that will allow an institution to evaluate the environmental impact of their choices in terms of digital transition? Tools or patterns?
Well, to evaluate these impacts for an organization, there are, in principle, there are methods around that are general, like life cycle assessment. You can apply life cycle assessment to all the products you are buying as an organization, and so you can do it for your IT equipment, etc. You can also evaluate your own digital services in terms of emissions. Also, you can calculate what is better to print a book or to supply an e-book and such things. Yes, these things can be done. These are the methods that work. But the big question behind this, will this really save the question of what do we want to grow and what should not grow? Yes, so it's no problem to grow knowledge or education or information, but it's a big problem to grow the number of cars on the streets, etc. So it's the problem, just to come back also to your question, if I may, the problem of this concept of growth is that it is not really asking what do we want to grow and what not, and we should start differentiating there.
I didn't tell you before, but there is a possibility on Slido to like a question, and there is one question that has 15 likes, which is a lot, because the others are like 4 or 3. So I think I need to ask it. What's your stance on 5G's implementation, knowing that this new standard consumes far more energy than 4G and goes against the 200-watt society framework? Soupir. Of course you can.
Look, I don't have a personal stance, but what I know is that with every technological development, there are a number of environmental costs that need to be taken into account, and probably we need to evaluate from an environmental perspective what these costs are, indeed in terms of energy, in terms of CO2 emissions, in terms of resource uses, and then yeah, that would be the angle that I would take to look at it. We won't go into the further societal debate about do we need it or don't we need it, but definitely there is a cost.
Yes, of course.
May I say something on 5G in particular? 5G, we just finished a study. It's not yet published about how energy efficient will the 5G network in Switzerland be 10 years from now. And assuming that the 3G and 4G will be discontinued, this 5G network would be clearly more energy efficient in terms of energy needed per gigabyte transferred. So we have also here, we can show, and there are good arguments to show that this is increasing the energy efficiency. This is not the problem. The problem is that that the growth of the data we will transmit through this 5G will be roughly at the same level as the energy efficiency increase. So we again will have this equilibrium that we in the end we will have a new, more efficient infrastructure using roughly the same or maybe a bit less or a bit more of the energy that today's infrastructure is needed. And if we have all these infrastructures in parallel, of course the result will be worse.
Lots of people say that 5G is now coming, but we don't know all of it about, like, maybe his footprint or so. And do you think that we have this kind of problem that we see digital revolution like 5G, we're like, wow, that's great, but we are not conscious of the problem, the footprint problem of a new technological revolution?
I wouldn't sign this. I think it's quite clear that the footprint of 5G per amount of data is much, much smaller. It's only something like 15% of the 4G footprint per amount of data we transfer. So that's quite clear. The footprint is shrinking. But the problem is, again, we are not aware of the fact how fast we increase our demand. If we always would do in 10 years the same with the new technology we are doing today, we would be in an extremely comfortable position, also environmentally. But we are not doing the same. We are doing so much more that it makes things even worse. And that's the core of the problem.
How can we make the public more aware of those environmental problems linked to new digital revolution, to have both in mind?
I think we need a lot of advocacy, and this type of dialogue are part of the advocacy, because the larger public doesn't always get that. Yeah, you turn your iPad, your Samsung on in the morning, you start downloading a few things, you start watching, and you do it every day, and you actually have an environmental impact. And this is the conscience of I'm using my device, and there is an impact that needs to increase. But this being said, if we harness the power of it, if we really use it for the right reason and for good, then it can have also a positive impact on the environment, because technology will definitely also improve the way we do. The way we develop further our economic models. So awareness raising, really a lot of advocacy on use it, but use it rightly, if I could say, is the message that we can pass. Because without that, we will have, as Professor said, a negative. We can have a negative impact on the long term.
Any reaction? Yes, over there. Thank you.
I'd just like to express the fact that I'm not really comfortable with the word "we" that has been used throughout the evening. There's no "we." It's not all of humanity in the same boat with the same interests. There are a lot of different actors that have very different interests, and a lot of these interests are actually in conflict with each other. And so for me, it's a fiction that we have this "we." GAFA and a basic user that is in this room are not the same thing. GAFA, so Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, and so on, they have a very clear interest in promoting this data overgrowth and using users to produce a maximum amount of data, in becoming addicts to data addicts. So I guess my question is, I don't think we need to make individual users responsible. We need to think in terms of policies. We need to make big social choices, and these are hard to make when technology is actually not very democratic these days. It's extremely difficult to access devices. It's extremely difficult to know how to operate these technologies as individuals, as small groups, and the industry is making efforts to prevent us from doing that, and states as well, actually. So I guess my question is, or maybe you want to react to this comment, but maybe my question is, how do you think we could come to this situation where there is a democratic choice about the use of these technologies, and it's not just happening, and then we kind of work out a way to justify them, to find positive uses like we've seen today. There are a lot of positive uses, but let's face it, a big part of the internet today is millions, terabytes of videos of cats playing or things like that, you know? What's the use of that? Why does humanity need that? Can't we just make our choices consciously and assume them?
Okay, so there is no "we" and a more conscious use and more democratic use of the internet. Who wants to react?
Well, I agree. I agree to your statements. We have to differentiate, and there are different interests. And what I think is really dangerous is that we lose parts of our freedom in this digital transition. We should definitely avoid that.
I won't say we, but I'll say I also agree, and that's it is part of the whole governance issue of the digitalization as well. It's a shame Doreen is not with us, because I think she would have a lot to say still on this. But it's about choices as well, as I was saying earlier, and that's what digitalization gives us as well as individual, a choice to be conscious about, from my perspective, the environmental impact of what we do with it.
Thank you. Another question there that you can now see here, I think. How do you suggest to overtake the power of capitalism, included private sector, to influence a true shift towards sustainable consumption patterns, for example, in food? How do you suggest to overtake the power of capitalism, included private sector, to influence a true shift towards sustainable consumption patterns?
Maybe I can start if you want. But from my point of view, from my point of view, engaging with the private sector is the only way forward. Transformation will happen with the private sector or will not happen. And we can agree, disagree, but it's true that the strong financial means that the private sector is bringing is what will bring the economic and the socio-economic transformation that we need for this planet and for the sustainability of our future. So it is really engaging with the private sector, making sustainable patterns of development embedded in the economic model that the private sector wants to use. And for this, it's the call of the consumers as well that drives the private sector into this direction. And there are some very good stories and change happening with the private sector. Here in Geneva, for example, we have what we call the UNEP Finance Initiative, where we engage with the banking and the insurance industry on how to make their business model more sustainable. In what will they invest in the future? What will be the impact of their investment on the environment? These are the questions that are more and more driving decision in the private sector. It's not rosy and pinky and lovely, and of course there's still a lot of work to do, but change is happening. What we need to do, and that's where digital transformation comes in as well, we need to go much faster because we only have 10 years. And that's where we can also use the digital transformation to lead the private sector into a more positive transformation.
Thank you. There is a question for you, Professor Hilty. What's the potential of the renewable energy sources to limitate the use of sources like fossil energies in the use of ICTs?
I'm not absolutely sure that I understand the question correctly, but there is, of course, this important idea of a smart grid that is better than our today's electricity grid, capable of coordinating demand and supply of electricity dynamically, which then creates an advantage for decentralized renewable energy. Because this is, in our today's grid, this is difficult to integrate because they are so fluctuating. And it is important that you coordinate demand and supply in a way that, for example, that when the wind blows and the sun is shining, then you can have the processes that use a lot of electricity, and when this is not the case, you can automatically postpone some things you want to do with electricity. And if the grid can do this complex coordination task automatically, it is easier to have decentralized generation of, let's say, solar energy in the electricity grid. I think that's a connection between digitalization and renewable energies, if this was the question.
I think so. So when we saw in your presentation that Google also wants to go carbon free, is that possible?
Well, it's possible. I mean, any company can become carbon neutral. It depends what you do. Most of the companies nowadays are investing in ecosystem restoration, what we say planting trees usually, to buy their CO2 emissions. But there are also some companies that are really turning away from CO2 emissions and going to renewable energy, which is the choice that one needs to do, because there is no future in oil, and we need to really walk away from it.
Thank you. We can take maybe one last question here. Yes, maybe here in the middle. I'm sorry.
I have one technical question. We mentioned the use of smart grids, and I was thinking, we often speak of artificial intelligence potential in the context of sustainability today, but given the fact that AI is in itself quite computationally greedy, both energy and material-wise, do you really think that's the way we need to go? Or maybe we should be aiming for like lower tech solution, like more traditional algorithm that are not that do not use excessive amount of resources in the first place?
Professor Hilty.
Yes, I think there are several reasons why we should not count too much on AI in solving our problems. AI is maybe the part of digitalization that is hyped the most currently, and it's not the first AI hype I have seen. Yes, it's the fourth. Yes, and I think we are currently overestimating what AI can really solve, and it has some downsides like the energy intensity of the learning, and it has the main problem that it is not transparent. So today's machine learning models, they have this black box problem, so it is not transparent what they really learn and what they really do, and I think we should use digitalization to make things more transparent, but we are, in many respects, we are doing the opposite, unfortunately, today. But more transparency should be the principle of finding solutions and not the opposite.
Finding solutions. We should meet once a week to find some, right? What do you say? Yes? Great. I'm afraid we're out of time. You need to run for your train. But I want to thank you again, Mrs. Bogdan-Martin, who's not here anymore, but still, Professor Hilty and Mr. Pozzi, for your time and your wonderful inputs. And thank you all for your participation in those current strange conditions. I remind you that the conferences series is not over. There will be two more, one on November 18th about the role for International Geneva on data governance, and a last one on December 16th about fake news and democracy. Thanks again, good evening, and stay safe.